Good afternoon, everyone. I am not John Sterling, the voice of the New York Yankees, although I know that at least one of our conversants this afternoon wishes that he was hearing John Sterling. That's for you, Mati. I am Nancy Abramson. I am a board member of the Zamir Choral Foundation and the director of the HL, and it is my installment of Taking Note. You just heard Schechter. Basya is best known for her group Pharoah's Daughter, a 7-piece world music ensemble that travels effortlessly through continents, key signatures, and languages with a genre-bending sound. She is also the chazan and musical director of Romamu on New York's Upper West Side, as well as the spiritual leader of the Romamu Brooklyn satellite community. In the summer, as in now, Basya is the cantor for Fire Island Synagogue, a smaller flip-flop wearing community, co-led with banjo-playing rabbi, writer, and scholar Shaul Magid. After 7 album releases that span Knitting Factory Records, John Zorn's Sadiqin label, and Oihu, Basya's most recent work is with Darshan, a musical midrash project in collaboration with esoteric indie rapper poet Eden Perlstein. In 2017, Darshan released Raza, a radical reimagining of the traditional prayers and mystical poetry recited on Friday night to welcome the Sabbath bride. And they are currently working on their second collaboration. I've known Basya for many years, and she is one of the most uniquely creative and authentic Jewish musician, spiritual people that I know. And of course, Matthew Lazar, the founder and director of the Zamir Choral Foundation, who has created the renaissance of Jewish choral music in North America. As conductor of the Zamir Choral, founder of the North American Jewish Choral Festival, of HaZamir, the International Jewish Teen Choir, and Zamir Noded, he has created and promoted trans-denominational, trans-generational, and trans-political Jewish musical communities for over 40 years. He has conducted choral and choral orchestral Jewish-themed concerts across the United States and Israel, and has conducted the great cantors of this generation. He is a co-founder of Teku, the first American Hebrew folk rock ensemble. And I am so happy that I can call him my friend for, dare I say, almost 50 years. And without further ado, you didn't come here to hear me, you came to hear Mati and Basya. So take it away.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Can it really be 50 years? I don't know. There's a Yovel in there somewhere, I guess. Basya, many bands bear the name of their leader or their founder. You've elevated that to a midrash level. Could you share with us the journey from your name to Pharaoh's daughter?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction also. Thank you so much. And thank you for that question. It's definitely an identity question. I grew up, as you know, in Borough Park in Brooklyn, and I grew up in an ultra-Orthodox family, and I went to Beis Yaakov, where we learned lots of Torah and Midrash. And one of the beautiful Midrashim for Shemos, or Exodus, is in the beginning of the book. And after Moshe is saved in the water by Pharaoh's daughter, she is bequeathed this higher name, Basya, which means Basya, daughter of God, because she realized that there's a higher power than her father that was killing children, and she wanted to save children. And because she realized a higher power, she got the name Basya. So my name is Basya. I was really just named after a great grandmother. And there were 5 or 6 Basyas in my class or my camps. And all of us were called Basi. Basi Applegrad, Basi Novograd, Basi this, Basi that, Basya Schechter. And when I became a musician, which was not while I was in school, because none of us in Borough Park are primed to become musicians. That's the last thing they want their kids to become, is a musician. So there are no music lessons and no opportunities to like cultivate any kind of talent other than like singing in harmony at the Shabbos table. Like that's the music education that we get. And when I was in yeshiva in Israel for the gap year, I was kicked out of school pretty quickly. By Purim time, I was out. And what I did was, it was close to Pesach when I decided that instead of, celebrating that time period in Israel, I was going to go to Egypt. I was going to let's spend things around. So I went to Egypt, and I realized at a Kentucky Fried Chicken, coming out in Cairo with blasting music of Middle Eastern music. That was like my entry into Middle Eastern music, was at the Kentucky Fried Chicken in Cairo. I suddenly heard that music and I said, this is my music. And all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but over the course of time, I started banging around on drums in the Sinai Desert. And I started to realize that I was a musician. And it took many, many years. But over the course of many years and many different instrument journeys, when I started to create a band, my first band, I did not come upon that name. my first band, I had no idea what to call my band, so I called it Temporarily Anonymous. And that was my band for the first 3 or 4 years of my musical career. It was called Temporarily Anonymous. And that could only go so far. You can't have a band called Temporarily Anonymous for more than like 2 or 3 years. So when I starting to become interested in bringing the new melodies that I was creating that were a little bit more Mediterranean, and the texts of my childhood, which were, I'm gonna take off the hat, which were really all the texts that I had to memorize as a kid, Pirkei Avos and Shir Hashirim and Eicha, you know, I had to memorize all that stuff. And then the new melodies and that stuff came together, and I was like, I'm gonna call my band Pharaoh's Daughter, so that I can marry all these parts of myself. The part of me that's interested in Midrash, the part of me that really had the foundation of my musical grounding in text and community in Bar Park, and the part of me that travels and is inspired by music and all the other places that I get inspiration from. So it was kind of like an aha moment. It was definitely like, it was an aha moment that I didn't come up with. It was my non-Jewish flutist who, after hearing me tell that story of one of our songs, said, Basya, the band is called Pharaoh's Daughter. And it was an aha moment when I said, you're right.
So but that's great. That's a great story. Before you continue, I just want to remind all of our participants to please put your questions in the chat. I will be monitoring that, and we'll ask them when it seems appropriate.
Thanks, Nancy. Basya, your deep knowledge of Jewish texts and your passion for the texts just comes out of you naturally. And we both know that the texts that you learn as a child, especially if you're forced to memorize them, become such a part of you that they come out sometimes at unusual moments. What are your early musical influences before you got to the Cairo aha moment and you discovered Oriental or Eastern music?
Okay, that's a really good question. My early influences were definitely the Zmiros that we sang at the Shabbos table. That was big because I love to harmonize just naturally. And so as we sang together, it was just an opportunity for me to do that naturally. And it wasn't something that made you think that you're a musician, because everybody did it. And in school in Beis Yaakov, everybody sits together at recess and we sit on the tables and we bang and we find harmonies. And that was also at Pirkei Avos parties on Shabbos. We would get together and read Pirkei Avos and sing and find harmonies. So that's one influence. And we had a lot of albums. We had Shlomo Karabach, we had Mordechai Ben David, a lot of Miami Boys Choir, which is a good the choral life. I loved Miami Boys Choir. And I loved Avram Fried, And then my father had his own interests of Israeli music. So while he had Shimi Tavori and Tzvika Pick and Kaveret Pugi, we called it. And so we had the Israeli Hasidish, music that we grew up with. Then my father had like random songs in English that we had at home, like really random. We had Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Yule Log Tree on a 45, so it was like a single. We had Tom Jones' Delilah, which was like this murder song. So I knew this, I felt the knife in my hand and she laughed no more. My Delilah. And then I had another Delilah song. And I think it's because my father's name was Shimshon that he liked Delilah songs. And that was his Hebrew name. His Hebrew name is Shimshon. And we had also, in the Bible, 3,000 years BC, there's a story in ancient history about a fella who's as strong as he could be, till he met a cheating gal who brought him misery. Oh, run, Samson, run. Delilah's on her way. I don't know if you know that song.
Not at all.
Another Delilah song. So I think some of these random influences are really the foundations of my early influences.
So two quick follow-ups for you. One is that Yari Bone that we heard on the way in. Is that connected in any way musically, or a first cousin of Zamira that you heard growing up?
The text is definitely, because we definitely sang Karibon Holam Veomaya Veomaya, that one. And I think we sang a few other ones. And
But none of those had shifting meters the way your Caribon had.
no, they did not. They did not. So one of the things that I became very interested in, I was actually a percussionist before I started playing string instruments. I played doumbek and rick. I have a lot of my stories of how I became a musician involved like really bad, like love pursuits, you know, like I was really in love with someone when I was 25, and he moved from New York to California, and I was desperate to figure out a way to get to California so I could like drum up the passion. And I found a notice about a Middle Eastern music and dance camp in Mendocino, California. And so I used it as an alibi to get to the West Coast. So I went to that camp, and I ended up falling in love with playing doumbek and rick. And we learned meters in 9 and 7. And we also learned how to sing in Turkish. And so I became a devotee of that camp. And I would literally come right out of the airport in San Francisco, and I would hitchhike directly to Mendocino, which was 2 or 3 hours, sometimes 5 if you're hitchhiking. And then I was learning all this stuff, and then I became interested in the oud there and the saz. So that's a place where I got my early interests. And needless to say, I did meet the guy afterwards, and it was a disaster. So then I ended up hooking up with somebody I met at camp in a gypsy music festival in Las Vegas, and that's a whole nother story. But there was a question that I'm not sure I'm answering.
No, but the answer is fine. It could be a different question, but it's fascinating anyway. I wanted to ask you about the one musical influence that about your father, and that is, did I read correctly or hear from you directly that he sang in a barbershop quartet?
Yes, he did. He grew up in the 50s. And so in the Lower East Side, he went to RJJ, Rabbi Jacob Joseph. He was a yeshiva boy there. And, his family was,
He must have been a rebel too.
He was a rebel. And he ended up, good question, he ended up leaving yeshiva and going to Seward High for high school because he was interested in music, and he ended up, and he joined a barbershop quartet. And I think it was For Reasons Unknown, the group was called. And the band was picked up by Don Kirshner. And they had 2 songs on the radio. And I think one was called like this: A, B, C, do-wop, 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 do-wop. I know the alphabet from A to Z, but what's in between bothers me. Oh, 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 don't be a fool. Don't be a fool. Go to school and you will learn the golden rule. A, B, C. And he was C.
Wow. So far we've heard so many different permutations of your musical journey. Was it a straight line for you, or were there several aha moments? When did you first learn about chord progressions, as opposed to just singing thirds or sixths in harmony for Zamir?
I think I still didn't learn about chord progressions, to be honest. I don't really talk about chords, and I don't actually engage with chords that much. My music is a little bit more rolling and melodic, and I kind of find a meditative space and a pattern. And then I find myself in that pattern. I'll spend a lot of time, like hours in that pattern, and I'll find a musical language and journey within that pattern. I'm self-taught, and I still have not learned like music theory or things like that. So.
Well, you went to the meditative point pretty quickly, because it's a very powerful component. And even in that Yari Bon that we listened to, there is that drone sound that really is can create a meditative state. and then maintain the meditative state. And it always makes me think how great Judaism is, because it functions both as an Eastern religion and as a Western religion, with so much in common with both sides of that equation.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about spirituality, especially in the context of your vast experience as a secular performer and as a liturgical shlichat tzibur.
Right. That's a, and I'm now realizing I didn't fully answer the last question, but I will get to this question. Just a little piece of the last question on the curry bone. I was also very influenced with the Bulgarian women's choir. And so hearing music with a drone and a melody that rolls around the drone is a huge influence on me, as well as Turkish music. So those are some of the influences. I spent a lot of time in my, I'd say early 20s to like 30, hitchhiking in countries like, Middle Eastern and African and South American countries. And I spent a lot of time traveling those places and really kind of getting inspired by like music from like folk traditions, and Turkish music really inspired me in that song, as well as Bulgarian music. In terms of spirituality for me, I think the journey away from the kind of Judaism that I grew up with, I think it was very early when I realized that the kind of structure and ritual and the limits that I was born with, they interfered with what I felt was my God-given kind of curiosity and sense of adventure and talent. And the way that my body moved, because I think how my talent kind of expressed itself when I was in high school was in dance. And when I was the head of dance production, and the way that I wanted to create an expression of music was through dance. And we had people who were like editing our dance moves and limiting what we were able to do in our performances because they were pressed. Some of the movements were pressed. And so I recognized early that the way that I find myself wanting to express myself and feeling that they were actually things that I was given, those were talents that they were nothing that I feel like I have that I'm able to do, I feel like is mine. I feel like they're all gifts. And I have the choice to either, offer these gifts or to keep them silent or keep them hidden. And I think that's a choice, or keep them within a smaller array of possibility. And so I think I always felt that I just wanted to express it as much as possible. So I felt like the ability to express my gifts was one way of kind of being in a place of being channeled. I'm allowed to be channeled. I'm going to let myself have those experiences of channeling. And then I'm going to offer the gifts of those channel experiences to people as much as I'm able to do that. And so the journey also of leaving Orthodoxy created for me an opportunity to open myself up to world expressions and because I was stuck without a system, because the system did provide for me ways of staying safe and ways of being in community. And without those things, I did feel adrift and at sea. So I found other things that were able to give that grounding for me, like alternative communities, like progressive Judaism was an enlightenment for me. Like to realize that I could be Jewish, I can keep myself connected to that line that I grew up with, but also find a voice for myself as a woman, and to find my way of reinterpreting texts so that I can find the divine feminine in those texts, and to also just a more inclusive and divining way, because this allowed me to go into one phrase in prayer versus in zugging, which is I think that kind of prayer versus the kind of prayer that you find in Jewish renewal allows entry into the prayer so that you can find an ocean, even with one song. An ocean is a good metaphor. I'm in Fire Island, so I see ocean around me. So, and Jewish renewal is definitely also a lineage of, and it's a new lineage of exploring Judaism that feels relevant to me and inspiring and spiritual.
That's a wonderful answer and a very revelatory and I think empowering message for a lot of our listeners and for their children if they can convey it. When you were talking about I was thinking as I was listening to you about the vikuach, the fight between the Vilna Gaon and the Baal Shem Tov, and the two approaches to being Jewish in a very bipolar kind of way. One is really the zugging that you're talking about, even if it's not chabda zugging, but just based on the text. And the other, of course, the Baal Shem Tov's concept of a boy whistling could be just as close to God as anybody else.
Absolutely.
And that dialectic, the combination of the two is what appeals to me about choral music or any music with text, because the music really sucks you into that moment and that personal psycho-emotional availability to the divine or whatever is beyond us. And the other text, and this text side is forcing us to concentrate simultaneously on the meaning of the word. And when those two are aligned, it's a marvelous combination. Of course, it can be used for evil as well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you in a more specific way about that whole spirituality, because a lot of people come to music not as being interested in worshiping God, but interested in something that's above just plain human endeavors.
Right.
And so I know that you are a thoughtful person and an experienced emotional person. How do you experience yourself personally the difference between an elevated state of mind in a meditative way, like if you get involved in an Eastern drone, even if it's not a specifically Jewish text or any kind of religious text, and when you're functioning at a service where you're trying to convey, as Gerson Cohen once said, the former chancellor of the late chancellor of the seminary said, the rabbi tells the people what God wants, but the cantor tells God what the people want. And
Wow.
I'm wondering, it's a phenomenal statement from a rabbi especially, but I'm wondering how you feel differently when you're in that zone of representing the congregation to God and when you're performing in a secular venue.
Okay, that's okay. It's a big question. It's a good
Too
question.
much?
It's a great question. I just want to also reference, you know the book Passion for Truth by Heschel?
Yeah.
He really explores the Baal Shem Tov versus the Kutsk. He really balances that question between like the truth seeking, like tachlis mind versus the spiritual kind of open, ecstatic mind. I think for me, that's a really interesting point of, I think I'm always trying to bring the artistry, the limitless possibility that's found in art and creativity into my role as a chazan. Because I think that there's so much possibility in leading community that anchors in the liturgy and anchors in the form, in the matbea, in the formulation. So, but within those structures, there's so much possibility of bringing, like, really, like I sometimes bring, let's say for Yona during Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur.
Yeah, on Yom Kippur, I brought in like a dance troupe, a modern dance troupe who interpreted and like theater and stuff. So to interpret the story, and by Ne'ilah, people and Mincha of Yom Kippur, people are ready for art. They're like, open us up in a different way. Like we've been zugging and we've been chanting, and it's deep, but they're open to something else. And it's like an awesome moment to kind of, so my interest is to bring those elements of art into the prayer experience, but also to bring the prayer experience into performance. And so when I perform and when I'm in chazan, I always find that the most incredible moments happen when I'm able to get the audience or the community or the tzibur with me, and not just, I want to break down the fourth wall, the divide. I'm interested what happens if we're if we create the experience together. I find that when I'm a chazan and if people are not singing, I feel like a failure. And I feel equally the same way in performance, that there has to be a few opportunities to get people in the song together and in the experience. So I'm always interested in that dialectic where I bring prayer, the meditative, the prayer space into performance, and the performance space into prayer. So that's what I like to do in those experiences.
Matthew, I'm going to interrupt you one more time here. You guys have about 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions. I want to encourage people to please put your questions in the chat. One question was, what's your website, Basya? And that's now in the chat if anyone wants to learn more about you and what you're doing.
It's a little bit of a dinosaur. I've been a single mother of a 3-year-old and a full-time job for the last 7 years. So I'll get to updating it. It's updated to like right before my baby was born.
I want to get back to the dialectic you were talking about,
Okay.
and the noble cause of connecting the audience or the kahal to the nominal leader, but really a leader by example and not a frontal leader, as we would say.
Right.
And I'm wondering, and you're coming from the spiritual, meditative, but also music making idea, talk to us a little bit about silence, the value of silence, and how it plays a role in your music making and in your spirit.
It's
You
so
can
funny.
be silent.
I know I'm silent. I'm just answering the question like this. I was just talking about the album that I did, the one that's the last updated album called Dumya, which actually means silence. Dumya, and it's the words Ulecha Dumya Tehila V'Asa Bracha V'Na'im Lezamer V'Tov Lehodos. And that text is actually a text written by Sadia Gaon. And it was a test that I was given by my agent in Israel as like, here, this is your text. I want you to compose something to this and then come to Israel and be part of our Piyut Festival. 8 or 9 years later, my son is called Sadia, and he's not silent at all. Just did not, that reverberation of silence did not happen. But I think that there is a really beautiful relationship between sound and silence. And for me, I think the silent piece is really about finding parts of the service to enter into spaciousness versus keep going after each prayer. Some prayers have a chant kind of feeling, and I think they offer you what we can learn from the kirtan world and from the Buddhist world and from other traditions is the way you play with the ecstatic moment and then the space that happens afterwards. I'll give you an example. For me, and also in the renewal, and also I think someone put in the chat, you're so lucky you have a singing rabbi to collaborate with, and I am really grateful for that. Rabbi David Ingber is like really an amazing singer, and so it's really fun to be able to sing together. And in fact, we were in a epidemiological pod together in the Poconos, so we actually got to sing on Zoom together during the pandemic. So that's a little aside, but we tend, because our services are shorter, we go straight from Psalm 150, Hallelujah. So that ecstatic Hallelujah moment, and we do a Sufi version. And then right after that, we go into Nishmat Kol Chai, the breath of all life. But the text of the breath of all life is really inviting us into a space of breathing. So right after we sing Hallelujah, I invite people to sit into the breath of all life as a meditation before we go into Nishmat Kol Chai. So I think my experience of, as being a Vipassana meditator gives me opportunity to play with meditation and prayer and gives space after chants to be quiet for a second and then enter the next prayer versus just running into the next prayer.
When you talk about the meditation and you mentioned that breathing, I always think of God's nickname, Yah, with that mapik hey. And I love to think about Judaism in the Eastern style because half of the Yud Hey Vav Hey is breath, in breath, out breath. Not to mention Avram changing his name to having his name changed to Avraham, and Sarai with her difficulties making a hey at the end of her name instead of a diphthong, and how that opens her up. So there's a lot in there that is worth thinking about. And of course, when you're singing, and we're all in the singing business, breath is everything. Not to mention what it says at the end of the Tehillim, that breath is everything.
And that's the last line we sing. Kol haneshama tahalel hallelujah.
Right. Is there hallelujah is a word of praise, and the Psuke de Zimra, those prayers of Psalms in the morning are all about praise. How do you feel a difference when you're singing or composing or davening for a tehillah, as in praise, and a tefillah, when you're really praying to God for something? In other words, if you were writing a hodu or a hallelujah as opposed to a anna hoshiana.
Right. I think it depends on my mental state and spiritual state and place that I'm in. I think I used to write songs in English, so it was very easy to connect the words because I was writing them with the experience that I was having. I think as someone who's accessing texts as well, I access different texts if I'm needing healing, I'll use the healing prayer. If I'm asking, if I'm in a desperate place, I'll access, like, there was a text that my grandfather used to say, Afilu im cher chadam, munechat savaro shel adam, al yimna atzmo min harachamim. Even when the sharpest edge of the sword is resting on your neck, it's never too late to ask for compassion and ask for an opening. And I wrote a song, I think right before my grandfather passed, I wrote those words, and it's like an impassion, and it connected to the feeling that I was having. And I think there are moments that I feel resourced, and I feel like, I feel like this, I could just like sing and dance, and that's more of a hallelujah moment. I could be more in that amagadlu ma'aseh chaya. Like I can experience the wonder and the incredible gifts of the universe in all of its bounty and nature and abundance. So I think it depends on where I'm at emotionally, which texts that I access.
And how about the music?
One more question, and then we're going to open it up to the chat, okay?
How do you feel, Basya, about expressing yourself and teaching this channeling? How is it possible to teach, and what short aphorism of wisdom can you give to encourage people to just be and let go, besides you're making music for them?
It's so funny you say let go. That it just means I have a song that I wrote when I was really young, and it's a let go song. And it's just, I'll tell you the first line because it is a teaching. Because if you hold on, you're really letting go. You turn a marble into a ball of snow. Roll down the mountain, watch it go and go until it. These are the songs that I wrote when I was like so young. Watch it growing. I don't know the last line. And you know what? That's just going to make you have to go to my song called Snowball from my album called Daddy's Pockets, which is like, it came out in '99, which is crazy. But that's from my first album. My early albums are in English. And that's it. Yeah. But even there, you see some wisdom. I think, some early 20, some 20-year-old.
A journey towards wisdom.
A journey towards wisdom.
Well, you've shared so much of your journey. It's really wonderful to speak to you and to meet you and to hear that music and to see your spirit and to hear it.
I'm so grateful, Mati, for your incredibly in-depth questions. Like, of course, your questions are the kind of questions that I can give you like a dissertation for every question. So I appreciate the level of.
So I'm going to ask a couple of questions now on behalf of our audience of almost 200 people. One of our participants says, you haven't mentioned traditional chazanis among your musical influences. And you grew up in Borough Park in a community that had a great chazanis tradition. Do you want to comment on that?
Absolutely. So I had two parents, and my father was a shtibel hopper, and we just jumped from one shul to another shul. And really, we just called the shuls by its Kiddush name. It was either the sardine shul or the kakash cake shul. And those shuls, we just went to the shul based on what kind of Kiddush they had. And those shuls did not have chazanis traditions. My mother, on the other hand, was a devotee of Bethel. And Bencio Miller was the chazan there. And she loved it to like the ends of the earth. To me, I couldn't stand it because I was like, why is every word 10 minutes? You know, I was a Kutzker. I had like a Kutzker personality then. It's like, I was like going nuts. I was like looking at the time and like, I can't wait to get out of there. And I used to play with one of his daughters, Michelle Miller. I'm sure I forget what her name was back then, but we used to run around and escape the chazanis as much as possible. And then after a whole life of like, you know, not wanting to be a cantor, it brought me back. And my teacher, Jack Kessler, really brought me back to the chazanis tradition. And when I was in the Krakow Festival in Poland, I saw Bencio Miller and I heard him sing there. And I was like, wow, you're bringing me back to my childhood. And I said, what a lost opportunity I had, like for not really diving in back then. It was so beautiful. I finally got to have access to it, but it took a long time.
Beautiful answer. And I have to say that I do hear some chazanis in some of your singing. It's just a part of you. Even if you didn't want to hear it, it went through you and some of it stayed somewhere inside your kitchen. It's there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Another person on the chat wants to know how having your son has influenced your music. We all know that children do some wonderful things and some very strange things to us.
Yes, definitely he's influenced my time availability, you know, and having a child was definitely one of my biggest dreams of my life. And I'm really grateful that it happened. It wasn't a given that I was going to be able to have him. And after many years of trying, I'm grateful, really grateful for but I have a very imaginative, incredible like spirit, but he's also he's 3 and we're still tied at the hip. He sleeps with me. It's very hard for him to let go of me. And especially during the pandemic, like I've been 24/7 with him. And I just have less time. I have less time. So I don't have as much time to play or to create. And so, yeah, I'd say less time is the operative word. And I know that it will change. And I know our relationship will change and I'll have more time. I also write a lot of poop songs and pee songs right now. And yeah, he's completely scatological. And so that's where we're at in terms of music.
Cute. What other influences that Mati hasn't pulled out of you yet are there in your music? What other forces, experiences, traditions do you feel have influenced you?
I'd say West African music. Ali Farka Touré is Umu Sangare, huge influence. I heard her on a cassette tape that was nearly broken in the foothills of the sand dunes in Merzouga, Morocco, by a Berber man named Wazoo, I think his name was. And he introduced me to Sangare, and she changed my life. So did Ali Farka Touré. So did Kulthum. She's the mother of Arabic music in Egypt. And her epic storytelling, deep, world-expanding pieces of music and journeys through music were a huge influence on me, as well as Quechua music in South America and Peruvian music, as well as Joni Mitchell, and Lassa De Sela. She's a beautiful composer from Montreal. Gosh, I think some of these are the ones that are off the top of my head, though I know there's so much more.
Yeah. So thank you. There've been a number of questions about your background and where you are now. Early on, someone wanted to know what you did to get kicked out of yeshiva. And a couple of people have asked variations of a question on how does your family feel about your music? When did you start singing with mixed gender groups, and was it a difficult transition? We hear all these stories of people who've left the community.
Yes.
Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Just remind me some of the other questions, because there was one that I had an answer for. Like, I was a beach brain and baby brain at the same time.
Yeah. What is your family's attitude towards music?
Okay.
Was that the one?
No, I think it was an earlier question.
Mm-hmm.
Leaving. There's something about leaving.
Leaving the community.
Yeah.
Get kicked out of yeshiva.
I kicked out. Yeah, that was okay. So that was the one I wanted to answer. So I was in Israel for the year, and I was actually interested in reaffirming my like, I really wanted to become more religious again. Like, I really wanted to stay religious, and so I went to Sharfman's. Ironically, Label Sharfman was in a group of musicians that I actually used to listen to called Vegas, and I had listened to them growing up. And Label Sharfman used to play guitar in our campfires, but he did kick me out eventually, because there were two things that I used to do. I used to hitchhike from every Friday before Shabbos. I had a few friends, and we went to the Trampiata, and we would hitchhike to wherever we would land, all over the country, to Eilat and Herzliya, sleep on beaches. We also went to the town in the middle of the night, and we went to bars, and they had spies. So they would find out that, they had spies. And so I'd sleep through classes and stay up late. And they found out that I was trying to plan a trip to Cyprus by boat from Haifa. And they were like, we're not having that. So they 3 times he invited me into his office. And finally, it was very kind. He was like, do you think, Basya, I don't think do you think this is working? Do you think this is for you? So finally I said, no, you're right. And that's when I left. And my family, I think my relationship with my father is the most complex. I think not only for the reason of leaving Orthodoxy, but also because I'm a musician. And my father was a musician who basically set out to be a composer and a singer-songwriter, and he wrote 100 songs. And he tried to be a musician for 6 months. And he said, after 6 months, if it doesn't work, I'm going to go back to yeshiva. And that's what he did. Nobody makes it in 6 months, but that's what he gave himself, was 6 months to shop his cassette tape or 9-track. And it didn't happen. And he decided to give it up, go to yeshiva, and start a family in Borough Park instead. So in some ways, I think for him, me becoming a musician was triggering in ways that are beyond just the religious journey. And so, but our relationship was very, very fraught. And I think my relationship with my brothers and sisters, and I have a very blended family because he remarried, and we have K'nai Nahara, my parents' 3 kids and also the 8 kids that K'nai Nahara, that, of his second wife, and then K'nai Nahara, the 7 more kids that they had together. And I think the family, the kids, all the kids, we all get along. There's some miracle that happened that all of us are there's no tension. Just, I don't see them a lot, and I haven't been in touch with them a lot, but there's just a lot of generosity and joy and good connection. With my father, it's fraught. And I have one brother who's involved in my musical career. He listens to all my albums. He's a musician himself. And he started playing guitar, and he's the reason I'm a musician. Because when he started playing guitar, I felt like we have such twin energy. I felt if he could do it, I can do it. So I picked up a guitar, and I picked up my father's guitar because he had his guitar still. And within 2 weeks, I started writing songs on the guitar. So the guitar brought out songwriting into my system, but I guess it was always there, and it was in my family. My brother was becoming an amazing guitar player, and he listens to all my songs, and he's a producer in some ways. So he's a huge support, and he's a credit on all my records.
That's really beautiful to have that. What about your mother? You haven't said very much about her.
complicated relationship, definitely. She's a creative, nutty soul. You know, she's a dancer, and she's actually she has writing skills and stuff like this. But there was a lot of pain in our relationship for complex reasons that I feel like it's not really the place to communicate right now here. So our relationship is also fraught, but we speak every once in a while, and she has a magical soul. I'll just say that she has a magical soul. And I think that I've really been blessed to have her magic. And I've also been challenged to have some of her challenges. And I've also been lucky that I've been able to sublimate some of those challenges into creativity.
Thank you. Thank you. Mati, any last words before I sum up and we hear a little bit more of Basya's music?
No, I think we've covered all the subjects, and אפילו יותר מזה, even more than that. And thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Basya, for sharing your spirit and sharing the generosity of your personality and your talent.
Thank you, Mati, so much for having. I feel so honored. I've heard your name for years, and now, I'm hoping that I can get to know you even more. And I heard your Yari Bone. You were lucky to be able, and it's incredible. It's like a 70s, like psychedelics, like jazz band, like Sun Ra Orchestra meets like classic rock meets. It's awesome. And so I'm so lucky to start like investigating some of your music as well.
Looking forward to actually meeting you and spending a little time.
Thank you.
Thank you both. This has been wonderful. Basya, your honesty and the beauty of and thoughtfulness in the way you responded to all of our questions is just really something that we don't often see. The humility and the essence of your being shines through, both in your music and in your conversation. So thank you for being a guest in this Taking Note Conversations about Music in These Challenging Times series.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Really. We're going to be taking a break next week over the holiday weekend, and the series will continue on July 12th. So those of you who are regular listeners don't be alarmed when you don't get an announcement about next Sunday. We'll be back. We will also be back the week of August 9th for the North American Jewish Choral Festival online. Since we can't meet in person, we are all finding the best and most creative ways to interact, to move all of our musical conversations forward. And the lineup and courses for that week look great. So I hope that you will join us for that the week of August 9th. If you liked this conversation, and some of you have been on several of ours, please go on our website, www.zamirchoralfoundation.org, and make a donation. We're not ashamed to ask for money. We don't do these conversations for the money, but like every other artist and artistic group, we need your financial support in order to continue to be offering all these great things like this conversation with Basya. So let's conclude with one more of Basya's amazing songs. This one is called Off and On.
fashions you to worship me, and you believe in all. You believe in all. Up from the silence comes your praise, like whispers from the burning bush, urging me to change, and I'm changed, so I believe in all. I
That was great, Basya.
Thank you.
Thanks. You know, I grew up in a different borough park because it wasn't the Bubba part of Borough Park. It was the Eitz Chaim Yeshiva. It wasn't the RJJ gestalt. It was the modern Orthodoxy. And, you know, Eitz Chaim was the first yeshiva in all of America that had Hebrew and English. So in my social circle, everyone had a piano. Yeah, we sang Zmiris, but everyone had a piano. In many cases, it was purely decorative, an aspiration that maybe someday someone in the family maybe would play the piano. But everyone played the piano. But in that part of Borough Park, this is in the 50s, there was no such thing as a Shabbos clock. There was no such thing as margarine. If you walk down 53rd Street, 54th Street, 55th Street, the lights were on. If the lights were on, they were on all of Shabbos. And you knew that there was a family that was going to Bethel and not to Temple Emmanuel. If you know what I mean. I know you do. To the Orthodox shul, not to the conservative shul. And if God, I remember the first time there was margarine on the table on a Shabbos meal, it was a shanda. It was an embarrassment that you would even consider having margarine on the table. But they were interested in culture, so that was slightly different. We
didn't have a margarine issue in our family.
Do you remember any of your teachers in Beis Yaakov, and were any of them supportive?
Yeah, I mean, like some of my teachers were supportive. I feel like I remember in Beis Yaakov Bar Park, I had like the first 3 years, our Hebrew teacher was either Friedman, Fisher, or they all had started with F's. And I didn't like that school at all, and I left and I went to a different Beis Yaakov Foundation. And I think the principal of that school, like that's when my parents first divorced, and they had my parents remarried in their basement within like 2 months of me going to school there. So like everyone was against whatever. So yeah, you know.
Was there any difference in the different places that you lived in Borough Park? We went through that litany. I remember 47th Street and 14th Avenue near Machsike, because that was a big hangout on Simchas Torah. Thousands of people.
Marzike was, right. So Marzike was on one side. I think there was was Bubov across the street?
Bubov was across 14th Avenue, but it really went to 15th Avenue. Bubov was really mostly hanging out in 15th Avenue, I think.
Yeah, but I think there was a Munkach.
Munkach.
So basically, when I was growing up, Munkach was, they were building it.
Ah.
So it was a huge construction site. So during snowstorms, my father was dating. I used to take my brothers out and get big, huge cardboard boxes, and we'd go sledding in the Munkach construction site. So that was one location. Then I lived on a dead end block on 18th and 49th Street. And that location gave me, like, we were able to play in the streets. That was one thing. And also at the dead end, there was, overlooking the dead end, there was a whole, all those freight trains used to pass by.
Right.
So I think the freight trains used to give me the imagination of what it's like to go somewhere else. So I would have this whole, like, I would create these stories of what happened if I would just jump over the dead end and climb into the freight train and then end up, where's that freight train going, and have an adventure in my mind. So, like, I think each place, then 16th and 52nd Street, we lived on top of the drugstore and a crystal shop. So I used to always buy, like, presents on the of crystals. And our next, right connected to our apartment was, like, just on top of the drugstore on 16th Avenue, there was a preschool, like a Hasidic preschool that was right next door. And then when it wasn't preschool, our door was open. So we were able to play in the whole preschool. So we had that experience. And different shuls, like different little shtibels were, like, connected to each location also. So I think each location had a different flavor. We'd have different friends and different.
I remember Machzike was one of those herring and ekkichel shuls.
Which shul did you like the best?
Well, we went to, thanks for the question, we went to Bethel to hear Moshe Kosovitsky, who of course was there, in the glory days. But he davened from the Amud, but when Ben Zion came, he davened in the middle. They changed the entire style of davening in the shul, but they didn't have a kiddush. Of course, the Musaf was over at 2:30 in the afternoon.
On regular Shabbos or also?
No, Moshe only davened on Shabbos Mevarchim. So he had a once a month job.
Right.
Yeah, he was worth it. People hung around in Borough Park, and he was already towards the end of his career. He had already been a big star in Europe and a big star in England, but by the time he came, he could still sing, and of course, I'll never forget the unbelievable moments. And you're right about 10 minutes on a word, but when Moshe would put the Torah away and sing Hashivenu, Elecha v'nashuva, he'd kiss the Aron, sing a high C, turn around. You thought the Kohen Gadol was looking right through you. I remember thinking the first time, they say Moshe was 10 feet tall and everyone would pass underneath him for the counting of Bnei Israel with the Machzis Shekel. Wow, it was so dramatic. And his brother David was pretty good too at the conservative shul and Temple Emmanuel. And then we went to Young Israel, and on Friday night, always Shomri Yamuna, because that's where my grandfather had been the shamus.
My grandfather went to Shomrei Amuna. That was his shul. Because my grandfather and grandmother lived on 13th and 52nd. I think it was, like, really close. It was, like, across the street maybe.
Right around the corner, really down the block. Did you say you lived on 53rd in the Utrecht too?
We lived on 53rd. I lived on 47th in New Utrecht and 53rd in New Utrecht, yes.
Yeah. New Utrecht was the dividing line. Earlier in the 50s, you went across New Utrecht Avenue, chances are there was profiling of Jews by the Italians who lived on the other side of that street.
Everybody lives now. It's totally, the other side is still Borough Park completely.
Really?
Yeah.
When's the last time you were there?
Actually, February. In February, I was visiting my mother, and I have to find train stations that have, like, elevators because my son was in the stroller, and he's not in the stroller anymore. But then he was in the stroller, and I walked through Chinatown in Sunset Park, and everybody had masks on. So because Chinatown was so connected to Wuhan, they already were in it. They were in it completely. And it was just it was a foreshadow, like a forspice of what's going to happen here in America. I think that I remember it so acutely. And then I went to visit my mother with my son, and, you know, she gets a kick out of him completely. And that was the last time.
When you were growing up, was 14th Avenue, 13th Avenue, was that a one-way street or a two-way street?
13th? That's such a good question. I think it was a two-way.
Yeah, it became a one-way street. We went back to the ghetto in Borough Park.
I don't remember. That's such a good question. I've been to 13th Avenue a lot lately because, you know, Amnon's Pizza. You know, we have family get-togethers at Amnon's Pizza.
You know, Borough Park was the first place there was such a place. There was such a kosher pizza first came to Borough Park. And I remember it was on 13th Avenue between 52nd and 53rd. And the guy gave away pizza for free because Jewish boys and girls just didn't eat pizza. It was, you know, it was treif. So he gave it away for 2 days. And then on the third day, the price was 5 cents. And on the fourth day, the price was 10 cents. And by the next week, not only was it 15 cents a slice, but there were 2 other pizza places that had opened up.
Wow.
Yeah, talk about, you know, the violation of a boundary. I forget what that's called in Hebrew. But
a gvul or an Erev?
Yeah, no, very good. No, it was the gvul that they were really violating. Some guy really risked everything. Do you remember any music? Do you remember any Bobov tunes? Was your father a Bobov?
No, we weren't Hasidish. We were just Yeshivish.
Just Yeshivish.
We were just Yeshivish. We were really, we were Yeshivish.
Do you have any of those melodies written down somewhere from Zmiris?
Melodies that we used to sing?
Yeah, family nigunim, family tunes, family. What was your father's Kiddush?
V'seim libeinu libam, lehavinu le'askil, lishmoa, lelmodu lamed, lishmor v'lasois, u'lekayem es kol divrei, Talmud tersecha b'yavo.
I hear the authenticity, and you're channeling again, especially with that miftah, with that fantastic eye that we all grew up with.
What about you? Sing me something that you loved.
Well, thanks. We for Pesach, which was the biggest holiday that we had. Of course, that was my father worked all the time, but on Shabbos, but mostly on Pesach, we sang all kinds of tunes. And my grandfathers, my father's father, my mother's father, had been in Palestine in the 1890s. And so we used to sing some Arab version of Echad, Wachad Mandain, Wachad Anadain, Wachad Allah, Allah, Allah. But because they forgot it, they ended up with Shabbat Shamayim Uvareh.
I need that. You have to send that to me.
I'll send it to you.
Oh my gosh.
It's an old authentic tune. And my father's family came from Brisk. My mother's family came from Vilna. So I was a real hach misnaged as a family. When I did a recording of the Baba V'Chasedim, my father was very proud of me, but he made a joke about it. He said, "This is what happens when you stay in Borough Park too long."
And where do you live now again?
I live in the Upper West Side.
Ah.
Yeah, but the other tune was because in Brisk they love teaching you in unusual ways. So the Echad Miodea became not just that Wachad, but was the Mishnayos. Echad Chofer Bar Siyachum Ara, Echad Chofer Bar Siyachum Ara. Shnayim miyodea, shnayim ani yodea, shnayim ochs metales, shlosh shach echad, arba avos nazik, in chamish yitam chamish muadim, arba. So that was those are my favorite melodies, and I still get a chill because I can still feel my parents' presence and my father's presence.
You know which one reminds me? You know the lecha 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 shamanim lecha ki lo nae ki lo yeh abdir bimlucha vasika halacha zukav yenu lai lecha 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 ki lecha 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 shamanim lecha ki lo nae ki lo yeh. And someone just asked where I live now. I live downtown Manhattan in Tribeca, but now but I've been out of my house since the pandemic started. March 23rd, we moved to the Poconos, busted a bunch of my savings, and I had a dream to always have a lake house. So I found a lake house, stayed there for 2.5 months, and now I work in Fire Island. So,
Do you have any plans to come back, or you're waiting to see how it plays out?
well, I'm here all summer.
Right.
So my
Oh,
plan
right,
is
summer. I heard of summer.
summertime. Well, right now, my information about summer songs comes from Frozen and Olaf. And my son watches Olaf on repeat.
Well, at least you can get some respite.
So I just want to interject here. You guys have done the Borough Park geography thing, and the different kinds of families you grew up in. Basya, I don't know yours, although you've shared a lot with us. But Mati, your parents were like, Yiddish, Borough Park, the whole thing, but they were also staunch Zionists. I wonder how that played out in your upbringing, Basya.
Oh, my upbringing, I don't know if we were, I went to all the schools that I went to were anti-Zionist, and
That was the other borough park.
yeah, I feel like all the schools I went to were anti-Zionist, like Beis Yaakov, Borough Park, and Beis Yaakov Flatbush. In between those two Beis Yaakovs, after that, I decided I wanted to be a dancer. So I told my father I wanted to go to the High School of Performing Arts, like the FAME school. And he had a nervous breakdown. He said, "You're going to Sarashnira." I said, "I'm not going to Sarashnira. That's another Beis Yaakov school." And he said, "You are." And then we came to a kind of somewhere in between with Shalamis, which actually was in Flatbush. And that was a Zionistic school. It had a relationship with Israel. And that was the first time that I actually ever had a relationship with Israel. And I managed to go on a tour in Israel for the first time when I was 16, in between my sophomore and junior year of high school. And it was a co-ed tour, but my father had so many kids in the house. I told him it wasn't really a co-ed tour. There were kids in my class going to this co-ed tour. And I said, "It's really not co-ed tour. It's Morsha." What happens, this is what they do. The girls start in the south in Eilat, and the boys start in Herzliya, in Haifa, in north, all the way up. And then they meet for one day for pizza in Yerushalayim, and then they go the opposite direction, but it's not co-ed. You don't have to worry. And
that's brilliant.
And I bought a secret wardrobe. I had shorts. I never wore shorts in my life. I had a whole alternative wardrobe. I got shorts and short sleeves. I bought a whole wardrobe in I went to these malls, and I found my whole alternative summer wardrobe. Never wore any of that before. And all of a sudden I was with boys, and I had a co-ed tour, and I didn't know anything to do with boys. And it was a disaster. In terms of I had a disastrous romantic experience in my disaster. But everything else, but I got to wear shorts, and and I kissed the ground. I came to Israel. I did kiss the ground. I was like, wow, all this stuff that I ever learned in yeshiva, it's oh my God. And plus I was actually coming out of hepatitis. I had a whole episode of hepatitis that was 6 to 8 weeks, and I was still completely yellow, but apparently I wasn't catchy anymore. So they let me go with my last minute of hepatitis to Israel on tour. They even tried to get the pigeons. In Borough Park, they believe that if you bring the Kabbalists and you bring pigeons and they put it on your belly button, that the pigeons come out, absorb all the bile, they die, and then you're okay. And they were about to do the pigeons on my stomach, and then I started getting better. But all to say that I ended up, that was my first time in Israel, in a Zionistic experience. But yes, that's that's a little roundabout, sorry.
That's a great answer. I never heard about the pigeons, though.
Oh, yeah.
That's not like throwing chickens around your head for kaparas.
Shlag and Kapars. I wrote a song. Oh my God, you'll love the song. This is the song that actually made my father not talk to me for 7 years. It goes like this. Chicken, chicken, one of you is gonna boil in my stew. My last supper before the fast, the substitute for sins I cast. Chicken, die for all my woes. Let me hurl you by your toes. Overhead and bowels loose. Our mess, God's excuse. Chicken, chicken on the cross. I have sins if you have sauce. Be my gravy, be my wings. Relieve me of my earthly things. Chicken, chicken crucified. You have nails banged in your mind.
How old were you when you wrote that?
I wrote that when I was working as an intern for the Forward, the Verwerts, for the English Forward.
Yeah.
And they actually published it. I was an intern. They published it. Someone said to my father, your daughter's poem got published in the Forward. And he saw it and he wouldn't talk to me for like 7 years. And it's crazy because my father wrote songs like that. I got that from my father. He wrote songs like this, like, picture you divorced from me, just one T for one and one for T, just you for you and me for me alone. No spouse around us to nag or to hound us. No ego deflation, no aggravation. We'll sure make it known, dear, to prospects that we're alone, dear. Day will break and we will start to take a marriage break, which we will take with happiness and glee. We'll split up the family, the boys to you, the girl to me. Don't you see how happy we will be? And get me to the, and he wrote, in the mikvah, that's where all the frummies go, in the mikvah, where you take off all your clothes in the mikvah, and you also shed your woes in your mikvah, thanks to mikvah, and, a whole intimate little moment there. So, like, he did all that stuff too. So that stuff was in him. So when I did it, I think he was also horrified that he got to see reflected in me the part of him that was on the edge. And it was
published in the Forwards.
And it was published in the Forwards. So to see something that, and I took it to the next level. So.
Bifar Hesia.
Bifar Hesia. Bifar Hesia. Yeah.
Well, this is great. So we're going to meet. I don't know when we're going to meet, but we're going to meet.
We're going to meet. I feel like you're. I not only that, but I think there's a project that I need your like advisorship on, like
Happy to do so.
Absolutely. Like, could you sing me something Chazanish that you loved growing up?
No. First of all, I'm a very good conductor, but as a singer, I can only channel a few things, and Chazanish was never my thing. I could listen to it, but it had to be someone who was really a singer, or someone with great dveikus. Because dveikus, real kavanah is something. Did you ever hear Elie Wiesel sing?
No.
Yeah, it's worth their recordings of. There's at least one recording. If you ever heard him sing, he was a phenomenal. Didn't have a great voice, but when it comes to kavanah, I never heard anyone with more kavanah. First of all, because of his experience. Second of all, because he was brought up as a Vishnus Chatzit, so he knew it. And he also loved Mozart and all those Western composers. But Chazanish, you won't hear from me.
What about, so what did he sing? So tell me, sing what he sang. What is it?
That would take us too long right now. But I'll do it for you when we see each other.
Okay.
And I'm going to have to correct Mati. He has a beautiful voice. It is sweet and pure. And I just realized another thing that connects the three of us. Mati and I studied with the same voice teacher for a while.
Who's that?
Not Ray. And Basya, you and I have also studied with the same voice teacher, different voice teachers.
Which one?
Ray, when you studied at Ray and Stephanie's.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are they still teaching?
They still are. I invited them today. I don't think they came on.
Oh my gosh. It's been so long. Like, and also it's so hard for me to stick with any kind of lessons. Like, I feel like I'm one of those people that's slightly unteachable.
You can always pick up a piece of wisdom from anybody.
That's true. Well, that's the way I feel like I learn. Like, I'm unteachable in that kind of structured way, but I feel like the way I learn is in intimate connection.
Good.
Yeah.
I think Adkan Hakafa It's not olive.
Ad
Not
Ka.
even maize.
Thank
But
you.
we made it. We made it to the next round.
Yes,
So looking forward to it. And thanks so much, Basya.
my
And thank you
pleasure.
so much, Nancy. Thank you to all of you for sharing this time with us.
Thank you.
Lahit.
Hit Raot.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.